In the context of the war in Iraq, the aftermath of Katrina, the genocide in Darfur, impending graduation, and Tom Cruise's new baby, it might be very difficult for us to weigh the relative importance of copyright as a political issue. I'd like to see if in the next 10 minutes or so I can convince you that it's one of the most important political and cultural issues of our day, and that it's very much more than a question of pop music. So we start with the Constitution, which says, "The Congress shall have power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries." So the very premise of copyright is written into the Constitution. It gives authors, in this case, property rights over the work they create, and then they or the publishers that they hand their rights to are able to market that work. Readers of this work can purchase it and consume it, but they cannot, under this rule, duplicate it or distribute it without asking permission and usually paying some compensation. And in the process, ideally, the public gets the benefit of a wide array of culture, knowledge, arguments, and information. And this is really important for science, it's important for art, it's important for journalism, and most importantly, at least in a constitutional context, it's important for democracy. Democracy needs widely available information. It needs robust debate, and it needs open critique. And we never know which information is going to be vital, so we allow it all to circulate as best as we can. Now, this is a precarious project. It has a utilitarian progressive goal, but it gets there by creating an artificial economic monopoly where none need exist. And of course, as we know, historically, monopolies are ripe for economic abuse. The same mechanism that would facilitate the circulation of information could also be used as a legal sledgehammer to squelch it. So we've added limits and balances. We've added a limited duration for this property right. We've added fair use exceptions. In other words, the work that belongs to an author for the moment copyright offers it to them really belongs to the people, and it ends up belonging to them in the end. And the people have the right to use it in some ways, even while it's legally owned and assigned to its author or the representative. So as much as the First Amendment, copyright is our nation's politics of information, and it's vital to the workings of democracy and culture. So let's move to the present day. Obviously, a number of things have changed. Since this moment, innovations have lowered the cost and skill barriers for both copying and distribution. We can think about the Xerox machine, the VCR, audio tape, broadcasting, cable, satellite. And most importantly, for recent discussions, the personal computer is premised on copying data and can do it with quite little fanfare. And the internet allows nearly instantaneous, nearly costless distribution to anyone. But it's not just the technology that's changed. We also have an array of corporations that didn't exist at the time that produce music and entertainment on a mass scale, premised on the kind of rewards that they can receive because copyright works the way it does. We've also had a number of cultural changes. Obviously, literacy has increased, universal education. Popular culture has in some ways become the terrain of cultural politics. And especially now, people expect to enjoy facility with information. Their jobs demand it. They expect to be adept with computational tools that allow them to collect, manipulate, rework, and share information. There's a generation that is being raised on Google, and that builds a certain set of expectations about where they get information and what they can do with it. And policy has changed. Copyright law itself has changed quite a bit. Few authors registered copyright in the early days, which meant they didn't, in practice, need protection or get protection. But ever since 1976, copyright law applies to all creative work the moment it's produced. So the law's new default is that all things are protected by copyright, all information. Copyright also covers a much wider array of kinds of information, from film to radio broadcasts to websites to software. So the law that was cannot be the law that will be. Within that law, economic and cultural arrangements for how culture moves must adapt. The question, of course, is how. So then we get to the copyright wars, and I think for this audience I don't have to rehearse how these things go. Peer-to-peer applications, lawsuits, speechifying and recrimination, new laws passed and proposed, technological countermeasures and high-profile hacks, Supreme Court decisions. Together, these have changed the landscape of copyright law, the landscape of the internet, and the landscape of the entertainment industry in powerful ways. Now, for the most part, the battle that has since erupted around these new technologies and new practices has primarily been fought in the courts and perhaps in Congress. But increasingly, it's being fought as much in the market and in what makes it to your desktop. This is both a question of the principles of copyright, information, culture, and technology, and a question of the practical realities of how to make this all work amidst those principles without perverting them. Now, the success of Apple's iTunes and Napster 2.0 were seen by some as a sign that we were going to reach a compromise, kind of compromise the record industry and peer-to-peer users couldn't reach on their own. And they've been joined by eMusic, by Ruckus, by Rhapsody, by CDigit, a number of commercial providers that were trying to offer some arrangement that would fall between the extreme poles of this dispute. Every peer-to-peer application, every court decision, and every new law has an idea about how copyright should work and how we should work with copyright built into it. And in the same way, every business model is a proposed solution with its own particular implications. Now, we here at Cornell are also in search of a compromise, but at the same time, we also want to scrutinize those compromises to see how those principles are handled. Now, in a lot of ways, university students and the universities they attend are very much in the thick of this dispute for a number of reasons. One is that students are of a very particular age and economic demographic that is very, very interesting to music producers and entertainment producers. They, despite how they feel on a regular basis, they actually have quite a bit of disposable income, and they spend quite a bit of it on music and entertainment. Right? Students also have an incredible access to a high level of information technology. They almost all have personal computers, and they have incredible access to fat pipes, right, to high-speed broadband networks that are built into their universities. Students are also in the thick of this because of a series of lawsuits that have been brought, especially by the record industry, against individuals who have been sharing music on peer-to-peer networks and sending what are called DMCA takedown notices, right, that urge people to stop participating in illicit music trading. There's a relatively new strategy just in the last 2 years of going after individuals rather than the designers of tools or the internet service providers. And college students are in some ways their favorite target, not only because they do spend a lot of time on these peer-to-peer networks, but also because of the maximum word-of-mouth impact. If someone gets sued, their dorm friends are going to hear about it, their classmates are going to hear about it, and maybe that will discourage a whole set of people. Universities are also a pinch point of this strategy. If the record labels can indicate that their students are part of the problem, they can try to put pressure on universities to make regulatory changes, to impose technical solutions themselves. Now, of course, students are not just consumers of music, although in some ways this discussion has focused on their role as consumers. Students are also, if not already, then certainly training to be artists, journalists, documentary filmmakers, librarians, engineers, software designers, scientists. And the university has a number of intellectual commitments that are at play here. We are not just the home at which these students exist, and not just the place at which they consume their music in their free time. The university is committed to educating citizens, which means a healthy respect for laws and ethics and democratic principles. But that doesn't simply mean compliance with the law or acceptance of common business practices. It often means understanding the law, debating its implications, and challenging it when it's right to do so. We also educate students to be producers of information, not just consumers, users of information, caretakers of information, designers of information tools, and some of them to be lawmakers themselves. And as teachers, we're in a unique position in relation to copyright ourselves. We may be consumers of information. We listen to music when we're home. We're also producers of information, and we also use information in the classroom in very important ways. So both students and faculty and the members of the university community see copyright from all angles. Now, this particular university, Cornell, has been deeply involved in this issue for our own reasons, because we have a number of students, because we host both copyright consumers and copyright users. Copyright producers, but also because it's an important part of the landscape of information politics. We've engaged in a number of educational efforts like this. We've been responsive to legal challenges, but we're also hoping to provide some legitimate option for music and entertainment that will do a number of things. One, it will satisfy students as consumers. It'll reasonably comply with existing laws. It'll work economically with the providers of culture and entertainment. It will fit technologically within our infrastructure. And most of all, it will dovetail with these intellectual commitments to immerse students in and help them feed their own culture, to ethically and justly participate in the market of information, to suit the democratic principles on which copyright law is founded. And we hope tonight will be an opportunity to investigate our options, to shed light on the obstacles and the opportunities involved, and maybe to pinpoint, to move towards, or perhaps even invent the future of digital culture.